911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, and includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised. These stories are based on real-life EMS, military, and healthcare experiences. Calls are real, providers are real, names and details have been changed to protect privacy. They may be disturbing to some and are definitely inappropriate for HR department. Any medical or mental health discussion is personal experience, not protocol. Use your damn brain. Follow your local guidelines, and when in doubt, call med control. If you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist, or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. Welcome back to Dispatch Dysfunctional, where chaos has a pulse and shift change is never guaranteed. Today's guest is Jennifer Kaufman, principal of the School for Students with Autism, founder of First Response Autism, and author of Grandparenting on the Spectrum. She trains police, medics, and firefighters on how to recognize and respond to autism with patience instead of panic. And she's living it daily. As a grandmother to a 7-year-old on the spectrum, Jennifer, thanks for being here.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what is one thing you want my listeners to take from this episode?
There's a couple of things, but I always stress the fact that people with autism are attracted to water, and 93% of the accidental deaths of people who have autism involve a water fatality.
Wow, that's a very interesting statistic.
That is shocking.
I never knew. That is a
Yeah.
very shocking statistic. That's something that I would have never guessed. So I
that's why I lead with it. There's other things I could say, but that is such a shocking statistic that we need to remember that.
That's kind of scary. So I gave everybody a brief synopsis of you, but of course I can't introduce you as you can. Would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Certainly. I am sort of immersed in the world of autism. I spend my days at a great school that supports kids who have autism from ages 5 to 21. As you mentioned, I am the grandmother of a child on the spectrum, my grandson Ben. He's 7 years old. And I am also the author of that book, Grandparenting on the Spectrum. The work that I'm most proud of is working with first responders and police departments to help them better understand the community members that they have in their communities who have autism, how to best support them.
I gotcha. So you talk about living autism for both sides, professional and personal. Before we dive into training and tactics, what did that movement look like for you when the personal side collided with the professional one?
Well, I was always sort of sympathetic to parents and try to be supportive as I can. But once I had a child in my own family, it sort of shifted my lens and made me realize that this was not something that, my kids go home at the end of the day at school. The parents live it 24/7 and have challenges that involve the community and being out in the community and interacting with the public. And, that's something I never really truly experienced because I was in my school. I see my kids in the community occasionally, but once I was taking my grandson out into the community and realizing what those logistics look like, it became a very different place, a different world.
Gotcha. I will say, as a responder, I think it gets to us mentally trying to be able to deal with the autistic patients that we don't realize are autistic, and sometimes they don't even realize it. For instance, my daughter was just diagnosed recently, and that was a shock, but not a shock at the same time. But I guess what I'm drawing with this is, what do you think would be the best way for us to understand it in the field better? How would we better approach trying to find out if they are autistic or not?
So I think that really understanding that there's a saying, you've met one person with autism, because everybody is very different. But there are some commonalities in terms of behavior, responses, and the way people with autism communicate that could help identify that, you're not dealing with a defiant person. You're just dealing with somebody who has autism and is trying to cope with a particular situation. You might have somebody avoiding eye contact. You might have somebody doing repetitive body movements or saying the same thing over and over again, repeating words or phrases, and or maybe repeating what you're saying to them back at you. And keeping in mind that like this might not be a person under the influence. This may be a person who has some neurodiversity. They might be dealing with autism, um, and and proceeding from that perspective a little more cautiously than you would should the person have been like under the influence or drunk. Um, and that's really one of the that's my purpose, is to help support officers be able to recognize what it's going to look like if they meet somebody with autism.
Gotcha.
Now, here in New Jersey and a couple of other places in the country, we have this Blue Envelope program. Are you familiar with it?
I've never heard of that. No, ma'am.
Okay, so there's you can go to our local police department and get a blue envelope, put your driver's license, registration, insurance in there, throw it in your glove box. And if you're a neurodiverse person who's going to perhaps have a bad response if you get pulled over, when you go into your glove box, rather than take out just your cards, you take out this blue envelope, and on the front of it, it says that this person has some challenges, and this is how you can respond to them, and might have some notes about that person on there. And it's just a way to communicate with the officer when the individual is unable to communicate with the officer.
Oh, wow, I actually like that. That's a really nice setup. That would honestly help, even in EMS on a wreck or something. Being able to get the envelope and know they are neurodivergent and what
Yeah.
could be going on to help treat the patient would be tremendously accessible and helpful. I don't know why
Yeah.
states don't have that, but that would be nice.
It's such a simple idea, right?
It really is, and that's like you said. It's very easy, very simple, and it's very understandable and explanative as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, what inspired you to start speaking directly to grandparents of autistic children?
To grandparents,
Man,
well, I felt that I had some trial and error myself with my own adult daughter, because here I am, I have all this knowledge and I have all these resources at my fingertips. And I started saying to her, oh, well, he has autism. This is what you should do. And this is who you should speak to. And really the parent is the expert at their child. The grandparent isn't really the expert. Even though we raised our own kids, even though like we want to impart all our wisdom, in this case, you really have to acknowledge that your adult child is the expert on their child, and they know the most about their child. And so, providing support in a way that doesn't like usurp their authority is really what motivated me to write my book.
I gotcha. So, on that note, would it be preferred or recommended to take the caregiver or parent in the back of an ambulance, or be able to take them to a scene if they needed to be able to help explain to the autistic person or special needs?
Yeah, absolutely. Because a person with special needs isn't necessarily able to communicate, especially in a time of crisis, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, what they need. And a grandparent, might be able to jump in and provide that support, keep the person calm, help them understand what's happening in the moment, and know how to communicate with them, because that's sometimes a challenge, that communication piece, because either they might be nonverbal, they might have an alternative way of communicating, like some kind of device, or it might be very difficult to understand them. And so that being said, yeah, having a family member in a squad car or in an ambulance along with the person, the individual, would be tremendously helpful.
That does make a lot of sense. Let's see. So, how did your outlook change when your grandson was diagnosed as well?
Um, I think that I, I I realize that grandparents can be a tremendous resource, and they're an untapped resource. Like at my school, we always provide training and support for parents, and occasionally I might see a grandparent at a meeting, but there's really not a lot out there for grandparents, and grandparents can provide a tremendous amount of support in so many different ways to the families of kids with autism, right? Autism is an expensive situation, and if a grandparent has means to help pay for therapies or to provide some kind of financial support, that's great. Insurance doesn't always cover everything, and if they can provide respite care, taking care of a child and allowing the parents to have some time to go out and uh, spend time without their child, without being caregivers, that's important too.
I gotcha. So, what flipped that switch in your head or life really from educator to advocate?
Um, I It's interesting. I have a little place about a block off the beach down in South Jersey, in Seaside Heights, New Jersey, and I have a deck out front, and I would sit out there and I would watch police, law enforcement interacting with different people. But occasionally they might find like a child walking down the block and no shoes, a bathing suit, and they had come off the beach, and they were unable to communicate who they were or what they were doing, but it was assumed that they were lost because they're 4 years old wandering down a busy street with no shoes on. um, and watching police officers like offer them snacks, and a lot of autistic kids have allergies or they're unable to swallow
Hmm.
properly. Yeah, and so things like that, and just seeing that there needed to be more awareness of strategies that can help situations like that.
I gotcha. So, what do you wish someone had told you in those first few weeks after the diagnosis?
Um, I think change your expectations. Like grandmas and grandpas, we all have ideas in our heads that we're gonna have these grandkids, we're gonna be baking cookies or reading stories, and like this is what it's gonna look like. But it's not. If a child has autism, that's not what it's gonna look like. And you're gonna just sort of learn to roll with it and not shift your expectations,
Right.
and understand that the situation is one that you support in the way that the child and the family needs support in.
So, I actually work with a few adults that are autistic in the EMS field. Um, and honestly, a few of them that I know, it has actually helped them tremendously with healthcare and their abilities. What would you say to the people out there that are adults or even, again, responders that don't realize they're autistic but are scared to get tested?
I think that knowledge is power, and I think that getting tested and receiving a diagnosis will only help to allow you to understand yourself better, allow you to find supports that you might use to improve whatever challenges you might be dealing with. Um, and I think that, it's 1 in 33 people are diagnosed with autism in our state. Yeah, it's high. And I think that there's so many resources out there. And whether you're a child, you're an adult, knowing that, like, I wear reading glasses, and that helps me to read better. It's not indicative of what I can accomplish in my life. It's just a support that helps me to read better. And I think that an adult who has an autism diagnosis can then use all of the tools to help them live more fully and to be independent and to really embrace the supports that are out there.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So, what are the biggest myths that are still out there about autism that you want to squash pretty much?
Um, well, a lot of people think autism is a disease and it can be cured, and that is not the case. The fact is that autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder and it can't be cured. We can support people, we can help them with their learning and their life skills, but it is not a disease to be cured. Some people think that people with autism can't communicate or lead independent lives, and that's not the case at all. It is a spectrum, and it's a spectrum for a reason. Many people have very independent lives. Other people need some support, and there are people that need a lot of support throughout their life. There's also, people who are nonverbal think that they can't hear anything as well. Just because you can't speak or express yourself does not necessarily mean that you're not understanding every single word that's said around you. And as educators, we always keep in mind that our students can hear and understand everything that's going on around them, even though they're not able to express themselves.
Very well said. Yeah, I actually recently learned about the 3 levels recently. As I said, my daughter was diagnosed, and I was learning about that. That's very interesting, and how they merged other spectrum disorders into the autism spectrum as well. That was very interesting to learn from that psychologist.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, what are some tiny changes that people can make to be able to make the home calmer or safer when we enter or respond to a scene?
Sure. I mean, you can take a look at the people that are around the individual who's in crisis, and turn to them for the communication and trying to figure out what's going on and strategies how to best support this person, because each individual needs different types of support. Um, what else? Single word phrases or directives, instead of long explanations, just telling an individual stop if you want them to stop. Asking a child or even an adult to sit down rather than stay here or don't move. Like, sit down, give them a very specific request. Avoiding abstract language, just being very concrete. Give me your hand. Like, children in school and at home, they're taught to hold hands. So if you have a child that's, you don't know anything about this child, just asking, give me your hand, and holding their hand, because that's what they're used to. First we're going to sit down. Then we're going to, if they're asking for crackers or something, then we're going to have a snack. First then statements. Looking for a device, a communication device, if there is one. And most importantly, allowing processing time. So many times you might ask the question of somebody with autism, and you don't get an answer, and you go on and you ask another question.
Right.
But the processing time is needed often with individuals for them to really compose an answer in their head and be able to communicate that answer. So allowing processing time and just keeping it real simple and very slow and calm. If you find that, a child goes missing, avoiding blaming the people that are around them. Well, wasn't anybody watching them? Well, wasn't anybody, didn't you see where he went? Wasn't the door locked? Parents, everybody, they're all doing their best. And, the blame game doesn't really help the situation.
Right.
And just focusing on finding the child, if it is a lost child who is eloped, should be the focus.
I gotcha. So you've run schools for 20 years. How different is that from the chaos that we see in the field?
We have, we approach behaviors, which you might call sometimes chaotic, as communication. And when it comes to people who can't communicate, they find a way to communicate. And that can be behaviors, that can be extreme behaviors. And trying to cut that off at the pass by observing signs and signals that that person might be giving before it escalates into a more intense situation is a way to avoid those intense situations.
Gotcha. Actually, that brings me to my next question. So, when we hit a scene and a kid's melting down, or even an adult, really, what are we probably doing wrong right out of the gate?
Um, Assuming that a child who is melting down or an adult is giving you a hard time. They're not giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time.
I love how you said that, and it actually goes back to how one of my preceptors and instructors told me before is paramedics, police, fire, we all see each other we all see people on their worst days, the worst days of their lives. They don't call 911 just to BS and chit chat. So I think that falls in line with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, an officer is always, you guys are in such intense situations and situations where you have to make these split second decisions. Um, but making decisions based on somebody being aggressive towards them versus somebody being aggressive because they are communicating something are very different situations, right?
Yes, ma'am. So you say behavior is communication. What does that look like in a call or during a call?
Um, it could be aggression. It could be an aggressive behavior. It could be kicking, biting, hitting, eloping, running away. Um, and working with the individual, trying to communicate with the individual and de-escalating the situation as best as you can. Of course, keeping everybody safe is goal number one. That is how it is in my school as well. But we would not do any type of physical intervention unless the person was in danger of harming themselves or somebody else.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how can responders tell the difference between, say, a meltdown per se and a medical emergency?
Oh, that's a good question. Between a meltdown and a medical emergency. Um,
And better question on that, to backtrack on that as well, same question is, could a medical emergency cause a meltdown?
well, if a person was in pain and unable to say, my side hurts, my back hurts, my arm is, and there's no physical evidence that like somebody's bleeding, and you go, well, yeah, they're injured, and they're just hurting. Think about you have a toothache and how much pain, and if you can't say my mouth hurts, you're going to possibly act out, um, and like trying to determine what the situation is and what is causing this extreme behavior when a person's unable to communicate is the challenge that um, first responders, I'm sure, have faced and continue to face.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess, how could we be able to tell the difference in the end just from walking through the door? Is there an easy way to tell, or would it be something we actually have to assess and determine over time?
I think it would take a little bit of time to determine. I mean, if you have um, somebody with the person, of course, asking them and getting information from them is the best way. But seeing that lack of eye contact, repetitive vocalizations that are non-contextual, um, looking for not receiving the type of responses that you might normally receive from somebody because of that communication issue. It's the social interactions, the communication, and the routines. Like I'm thinking of my grandson. If he is stressed out, he might be doing certain routines like scanning the room and running his hands around the room over and over again. And it's very evident that this is not a behavior that a typical 7-year-old would have. And so if you met him, you'd think, okay, this person is neurodiverse, may have autism, and like, where do we go from here? Because we're going to handle it differently than somebody who is just being um, difficult because they want to give a police officer a hard time,
Right.
right?
So here's a question that kind of falls back on that as well: is what are some of the little things that we can change, such as lighting, tone, positioning, that would actually start to calm instead of escalate? Kind of like you said earlier, to de-escalate.
Yeah, well, so you just mentioned some of them. Um, Keeping the lighting down, keeping things quiet. If it's in a public place, having the ability to take the person to a quieter place where they're not on display, right? When there's an emergency, when there's a crisis situation, all the lookers are gathered around to see what's going on. Respecting the individual's dignity and privacy, and having them be able to go through what they're going through without an audience is helpful to everybody and can actually work to de-escalate a situation.
Gotcha. So talk to me about First Response Autism. What made you build this program?
Um, well, as I mentioned, it was seeing first responders struggling to support people with autism in the community. And the more I spoke with my local police department, because we have the police into the school all the time for different things, um, I realized that the training that they were getting were basically like videos with a little test at the end. And that's very different than having somebody come in and talk about their own experience, talk about strategies, and address specific questions about situations people may have been through.
Gotcha. So was there ever a moment when a cop or a medic told you this training was flat out necessary?
We we did a training. My first training was actually in Seaside Heights with their police department. We did a survey at the end, and 100% of the officers said that they were more knowledgeable leaving than when they had come in.
That's
And
amazing.
that was really, yeah, that was very rewarding for me.
That's awesome. So when you're in front of a room full of uniforms, what is the first bad habit you break out of us?
um, I think that it's an overall shift in approaching a situation, because I think you approach a situation like, okay, what what's happening? How am I going to protect myself? How am I going to protect everybody else? And this like changes the focus a little bit to the person. Like, what is this person going through, and are these behaviors because they're struggling to communicate?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So this is something I was actually curious on as well, and that's why I typed this here: is how can dispatch, the 911 centers or private companies, if y'all use them in your areas, set us up for success before the tones even drop, before we're even dispatched?
That's a good question. I think that dispatch might have some questions for the caller about what's is this person neurodiverse? Is this person special needs? Is there anything we need to know about the person that you're calling about, that has to do with their ability to communicate or to control their behaviors?
Gotcha. So what should we stop saying or start saying to keep an autistic person from shutting down on us?
Um, well, I think understanding that a lot of people who have gone through the school system as people with autism are taught common phrases. Things like, "Are you lost? Can I see your ID?" Like, we work hard so that our students are able to identify themselves and to understand requests like, "Can I see your ID?" or "What is your mom's name? What is your name?" And then waiting for that processing time to happen so the child can respond or the individual can respond.
So break it down as simple as possible.
As simple as possible. Avoid offering them foods as comfort, right? Tell them what you're going to do before you do it. That's a big one, right? Even if you're just going to put the lights on in the car for some reason, or you're going to pick up a walkie and radio somebody, just let the individual know what you're doing, because a lot of that anxiety build comes from not knowing what's happening.
Gotcha. And that probably, this next answer as well, you probably just answered it with that. But so what's the best de-escalation move you've ever seen work?
This is like a crazy one, and I just heard it from a firefighter actually not too long ago, and I know this would work because kids with autism, adults with autism, for whatever reason, love to give high fives, right? Love to give high fives. And I've yet to ask somebody with autism, like, hey, high five. They always get a response. So I was talking to a firefighter who said when they go into a fire and they're looking for a child who might be under a bed or in a closet, they'll walk around the room just saying, hey, buddy, give me a high five. And a kid will come out from under the bed to give him a high five.
Huh.
And I think like just that, again, like the blue envelope, just such a simple thing can get a child or an adult to relax, because like, hey, here's a police officer who's like, give me a high five. I know what to do. I know what that is. I don't have to talk. I just have to give a high five. And it starts to sort of build that relationship so that you can go from there.
That's awesome. I would have never thought about that. So you teach families to make responder cards. What goes on one of those, and should they be more prevalent?
I'm sorry, I missed the first word. Responder calls or
Cards.
responder?
The responder cards that you teach families to make. What goes on them, and should they be more prevalent than they are now?
You can make responder cards that you can give to somebody with information on it, so that you're not spending time, like you're focusing on an individual in crisis. So do you want to spend time communicating with the police officer or the first responder, saying like, this is their name, this is what their diagnosis is, these are what their challenges are, this is how they communicate? Better to be able to just provide a card that has all of that information, so that the focus can be more on remediating the situation and supporting the individual.
Okay, so if we're walking into a home, what should mom or grandma or anybody really tell us in the first 10 seconds of walking in?
My child has autism, or my person has autism and has a difficult time communicating. They might let you know that they hit, they bite, they spit, like what their reactions are in stressful situations, so that an officer can anticipate that. And I think that the officer going into the situation and having all of that information and understanding that if somebody is spitting, it's not because it's an aggression. It's because this person is at a high anxiety level with the does not have the ability to communicate.
Right. Yes, ma'am. So how can small departments get autism awareness into annual training without breaking their budgets?
Well, I could speak from my own experience with First Response Autism. I do Zoom trainings, I do in-person trainings, and I create programs that can fit just about anybody's budget.
Perfect. So what's one fix every agency could implement tomorrow?
Oh, the Blue Envelope program. The Blue Envelope program is just such a simple concept to have a way for an individual who is pulled over to communicate with a police officer without actually having to speak.
So when words don't work, what should our body language say instead?
Well, that's an interesting statement, because words, as I mentioned at the beginning, people with autism, for the most part, do understand what you're saying. Just keeping it simple, keeping it direct and friendly and concrete, not complex requests or demands. Just please sit down, or you know, just very simple.
So, how do we build muscle memory for calming instead of commanding?
Well, in even if somebody doesn't have autism and isn't identified that way initially, approaching situations like that with an open mind and with curiosity versus judgment, I think that's an important tool.
And I think that's where a lot of us, even in the field we work in, or laypersons for in reality, is we don't seem to understand or grasp the spectrum as we should, and we automatically judge knowing it, and that's something we shouldn't do. We should learn to understand the person before we try to react.
Right. And look, autism has been around for a very, very long time.
Right.
Many, 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 many decades, if not centuries. I'm sure centuries. And that being said, finally, just in the past few years, the needs of the community the needs of the community members who are neurodiverse or autistic are being supported.
Yep.
And that's my role. That's why I do this.
Yes, ma'am. So you've watched responders get it right and also get it wrong. What's the
Yes.
call you'll never forget that someone told you about?
Oh, I hear things and I read stories on the news about situations that sort of make me go, oh no, because that person may have been autistic, or that person may have had communication challenges that escalated and led to tragic situations. Personally, I think that very first view of police officers working with a young child and trying to get him to tell them if he was lost and if he was, what's your name, and just uh, peppering him with questions and not giving him that response time, like that's going to stick with me. Definitely, it has. That's really motivated me for all of this.
Gotcha. So have you ever seen a situation turn around because someone finally slowed it down and started breaking it down for the people in need?
I don't know, because I'm not in the field with law
Right.
enforcement. I don't have a lot of exposure to that, but I've definitely seen that in my own school, where sometimes we have newer staff members or people who are not familiar with our students and with autism. And once we start providing them with some support on how to speak with our students and support them, we see big changes and connections, and it's good stuff.
Gotcha. So one last question for the rookies listening: what's the one sentence they should remember the next time they meet someone on the spectrum?
That is, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And just because what works with this one person does not necessarily mean it will work with the next person. But have an open mind, be supportive, and try to listen to what the person's telling you, even if they are not using their words.
Perfectly said. Jennifer, this conversation needed to happen. You've shown us that autism awareness isn't about pity or political correctness. It's about safety, empathy, and understanding that people we serve need to be better understood and better treated. So, for anyone who wants to dive in deeper or to find out more about this, how can they find out more about you, find out more about resources?
Sure. I have a website, firstresponseautism.com, or they can reach out to me at just Jen, at firstresponseautism.com.
Awesome. And what was the name of your book again?
The name of my book is Grandparenting on the Spectrum, A Journey from Both Sides of the Desk, and that is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Oh, perfect. And if you're a responder or a parent listening, start the conversation today. One calm moment can change everything. If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy. You're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Reach out to me. Reach out to somebody. text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone, not in this job, not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page, Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.